What does this video have to do with motorcycles?
Well, as you can see, we're not in the usual setting. We're not in your bike shed. We're not in the office with a green screen behind us, and we're not out amongst nature. We're not in my backyard. We're actually in Kevin's toy hauler, and this is what he uses to travel around the country. He has his trike in it. He has a Softail in it, and he picked it up for a few different reasons. And that's what this video is going to be about. Why you got a toy hauler? Why you decided to be part of the trailer gang, and and what that means to you overall.
About a year and a half ago, we published an article in the Shop Talk section of the website, why we're changing our annual big rides and ride reports. And it had to do with the toy hauler. Not this one, a smaller version of this one.
Okay, and for those of you that don't know, annually Kevin usually does a 40-day, around about 40-day trip on the bike. And he usually leaves out from here in North Mississippi and goes to the Arctic Circle, out west, down Mexico.
When we published that report a year and a half ago, we listed out what we believed would be the benefits of having a toy hauler. And they fell into three main categories: saving money, logistics, time, and then being able to see more on our trips. And at the time we did the report, we believed that that would be true, but we hadn't experienced it. We've now gone on multiple trips. We traded in the smaller toy hauler for a larger one that gives us a little bit more living space. We were going to talk about the pros and cons of traveling this way with the toy hauler. And before we even start that, I want to say, I'm 62, Mary's 64. If we were in our 20s, 30s, even 40s, we would not even consider this. And the reason is because there's a certain amount of adventure in all the challenges that you meet when you're traveling on the road.
Yeah.
Okay? And there's a certain amount of excitement when you're riding, any kind of riding, even if it's 600 miles of straight, flat interstate. But the fact of the matter is, Mary and I have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles that we've ridden. We've ridden as much straight, flat, boring interstate as we want to ride. And so now what we want to do is spend the limited time that we have left on this earth riding the most scenic places, riding the most twisty, curvy roads, riding, the biggest mountains. And we don't want to spend time, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, days on end, going down the straight, long interstate. Not that that's not interesting. If in our 20s, 30s, and 40s, that was interesting. It's not interesting anymore.
Yeah, not only that, when you're not out riding, being leisurely, you get to come back to this. And this beats the hell out of a tent or a hotel room.
Right.
So you mentioned under different circumstances. For example, if you were a bit younger, this wouldn't even be an option for you. And, I feel like that's going to be the case for a lot of people because there are a lot of pros, but there's also a lot of cons as well.
Yeah, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. I tend to overanalyze stuff or analyze it enough, which is a lot.
Yeah, or talk yourself into it.
Yeah, exactly. I've thought a lot about the pros and cons, and for us, there's way more pros. And when I was talking to you about it the other day, you said, what about this, what about that? And I hadn't even thought about that. So let's just go through them. The pros are, one, we are able to make more trips each year and see more and actually spend less time out away from home, away from the shop. Because the fact of the matter is that when you're traveling on a bike, it's going to take you longer because you got to stop more for gas. It's going to take you longer to eat up, say, 600 miles of interstate. You got to stop for gas way more often.
Right.
You got to stop and stretch your legs a little bit more than in a truck. But here's the big time waster with the motorcycle. With the motorcycle, you've got to figure out which motel you're going to stay in. You got to figure out where that motel is. You got to check into that motel, which might take 5 minutes or might take 30 minutes, depending on the line. You then have to unload the bike, get it all into the motel room. Everything's different in each motel room, but you got to get it all into the motel room. Then usually, for budget reasons and health reasons, we don't eat out a lot. So then we got to go to the grocery store and get some food so that we can have some dinner and have some breakfast in the morning and fix lunch for the next day. And then in the morning, we got to pack everything back up, take it all back out to the bike, which might be a 20-yard walk, or it might be a 200-yard walk, just depending on the motel. And if you're on the second, third, or fourth floor, and it, all that.
Right.
And we figured that on average, all the logistics of having a place to stay, and no, we're not stopping the bike and rolling out a sleeping bag and sleeping on the ground wherever we stop the bike. But if you stop at a motel or hotel, that time, and it would be the same if you went out to eat too, because you take time, going to a restaurant, is 2 to 2.5 hours a day is eaten up on the logistics of where you're going to stay that night, what you're going to eat, unloading, loading back up. With the toy hauler, if we're just eating up the miles, we're not to where we want to ride yet, we pull over into a rest area 90% of the time. Sometimes not a rest area, sometimes it'll be a truck stop. But a rest area, we don't even get off the interstate. We just pull into a rest area, get out of the truck, come into here, and we're home. We have all of our food, we have our shower, we have our bed, we have our TV, we have our computer, we have everything. So that's a huge, huge pro. And when you get old, time is your most valuable commodity. So if you take, like our trip to Alaska was a 53-day trip. Okay, and you multiply that 2 hours, just say 2, not 2.5. So we're talking 106 hours. And if you have, let's say that you have 16 hours a day, what's 106 divided by 16?
Hey Siri, what's 106 divided by 16?
6.5 days. So that 53-day trip, we actually spent 6.5 full days just on logistics. That doesn't include needing to stop more, etc. We just came back from a trip. We traveled 5,200 miles in the truck and 981 miles on the motorcycle. The 981 miles we rode on the motorcycle was all primo riding. It was all great riding, fantastic scenic riding. You can look at the ride report, which we'll put in the link below. The 5,200 miles, of the 5,200 miles, there was maybe 200 miles, just little parts here and there, that I would have rather been on the bike. The vast majority of those miles were boring, straight, interstate riding. And or very cold, very hot, not ideal for riding.
All right, so I fully understand that. But on the other side of that coin, just looking at it from my perspective, as someone who takes a maximum of a 2 to 3 day vacation each time, would it be beneficial to go through the trouble, loading this big trailer up, hooking up to the trailer, pulling it around, 2 days in a hotel room isn't as bad as 40, obviously. So, I mean, do you agree that it's not for everyone in terms of saving time?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if all we did was 2-3 day, weekend trips, maybe not so much. Conversely, what do we do? When we travel, we do 4 main things. We visit family. We find the best, most curvious or elevation changing roads, that we can. Fun roads to ride. Scenic places, Yellowstone, the Grand Tetons, places like that. And then the other thing we do is we go to bike rallies. And you just brought up about 2 to 3 days. And usually a bike rally, we might leave on a Thursday or Friday and then come back on a Sunday. And We used to do it in tents that we set up on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Then we got sort of creaky and started getting older. So we got pop-up tents, and we did pop-up tents for like 15 years. And it was much nicer than tents on the ground. But if we go to a rally, we're not going on a tent on the ground or in a pop-up tent. We do go in this, but that's to a rally. If we were going to the Ozarks to ride,
which are only a few hundred miles from us here.
right? If we were going to the Ozarks to ride for the weekend, yeah, it might be better and easier to go and stay in a motel. When we went to Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, we booked it, got up to Nova Scotia,
Mm-hmm.
set this up, camped, set up camp, and then rode around Nova Scotia. And then when we went to Newfoundland, we moved a little closer to Newfoundland, set it up. But when we went to Newfoundland, we did not take this. We stayed in a different motel each night in Newfoundland, simply because there was no riding in Newfoundland that we didn't want to do. And so, there are absolutely scenarios where staying in a motel would be better. So another big thing for us is that we save money. In those trips, we figured out roughly what we spend, and we usually what we spend each day between gas, motel, food, that all that stuff. And we stayed primarily in Super 8s. Mary likes the Super 8 motels, or liked the Super 8 motels, and we stayed primarily in Super 8s just because they were usually clean. They're all over the place, and they're less expensive than staying like in a Wyndham or something.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And the quality of, say, a Holiday Inn can vary so drastically. So anyway, so we stay mostly Super 8s, and we figured we spent on average $155 a day.
Mm.
So if we're on a 30 to 50 day trip, that's going to cost $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. And doing the same trip in this, we're saving about $80 a day. That does not account for the cost of the actual trailer.
Right. Well, you can't
Okay.
beat that.
But, gas, even though the truck pulling this eats more gas than the motorcycle, it's regular gas at $1.99 a gallon instead of $2.79 a gallon. We're not even taking into account that the truck depreciates far less than the motorcycle for miles driven.
Oh yeah, a motorcycle with 100,000 miles on it.
Yeah,
That's little.
and the maintenance, motorcycle tires you're changing every 8,000 to maybe 20,000 miles on the front tire, whereas truck tires, you're talking 60, 70, 80,000 miles to change them, and they don't really cost much more than a motorcycle
That's
tire.
true for Ford.
So, we're not taking any of that into account. We're taking into account food, gas, lodging, okay? $80 a day. So let's just take a 40-day trip. If we save $80 a day on a 40-day trip, that's $3,200. You can see very quickly how that savings will pay for the trailer.
Oh yeah, most definitely. But the question comes to my mind: the initial cost. I mean, you have to get the toy hauler, obviously, and they're not cheap.
Yeah, and the cost of a toy hauler varies widely. Our first toy hauler was well under $20,000, and it was a little bit small, but it did the job. We made a lot of trips in it. I think we went over 15,000 miles in it. We did a lot of trips in it, and it was well under 20,000, and the payments were under very small down payment, and the payments were under $200 a month. So when you look at small down payment, let's just say $200 a month, and it wasn't even that. That's $2,400. We saw on one 40-day trip, we saved $3,200. So, but yeah, it does increase debt, or it's one big expenditure. Now this is quite a bit larger toy hauler, and it still was under 25,000. So for us, it's we're saving money, and I know we make trips not like most people don't make as big a trips that we do. A lot of people have a lot more discretionary money than we do, and some people spend 30, 40, 50, 60, even $100,000 on a toy hauler. That's just not in the cards for us. For us, we had to make it make financial sense on a year-to-year basis, and for us it does. And I recognize we have far more travel days than most people have.
Now, you mentioned that this one is a lot bigger than your last toy hauler, which brings to my mind the size of this thing. So you have to have somewhere to store this, right? I mean,
oh yeah,
some people don't have acres to just let something like this sit.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I've read people spending $50 to $80, sometimes $100 a month to store their trailer at some storage facility. We fortunately have the space where we just can park it, plug it in, and that's another con that I hadn't thought about. Where to put it. You have room at your place, maybe barely.
Yeah, barely.
Yeah.
If I want to live in this thing.
So one of the things that pushed me over the edge in even entertaining the heretical idea of getting a trailer to put a motorcycle in was when we were coming from my parents' house, where we've been visiting, to my brother's house in Las Vegas. My parents live in San Diego. We left as early in the morning to avoid the heat. We still were traveling through Las Vegas to get to my brother's house in Lake Mead, and it was 113 degrees. And it had been between 110 and 113 for hours. And we could have stopped and waited and got to my brother's house 6 or 8 hours later and traveled that last little bit at night, and it still would have been 100 degrees. Okay, so Mary, to keep from falling out, literally she was getting heat stroke. We were buying 5-pound bags of ice, poking holes in the bags of ice so that as it melted it would go out. And she was holding that bag of ice on her lap.
Yeah.
And that was the second time that she had a brush with heat stroke. One other time was a year or two before that, where we had to pull over and just dump water all over her. And you go, well, don't ride when it's so hot. Well, that same trip where we had to pull over and dump water all over, we also rode through a blizzard. There's just some areas of the country, if you got to ride through hot to get to nice weather in another. And so that's when I really started, that sort of pushed me over the edge to even start thinking about it. Was, she's not going to, I can't have her falling out, So here's a big con of using a toy hauler. You miss out on a lot of adventure. There's a lot of adventure to going on a motorcycle trip and encountering all the adversity of the road. It's what makes a lot of the fun, a lot of the stories. It's what you look back on. Look, when we rode up to Alaska, we rode all the way up to the Arctic Circle and back. We were somewhere in the Yukon, making our way up to the Arctic Circle, and we stopped at a gas station. The closest town behind us was 50 or 60 miles. The next town ahead of us was 150 miles, and it was a rainstorm like we hardly have ever seen. And the wind was blowing, and there was no real shelter at the gas station. So, we had to go. We will remember that adventure. We had to go, and we rode through crazy wind and crazy amount of rain, and lightning for 30 or 40 miles before it started clearing up. That's something you just
Oh yeah,
never
no.
going to forget. You lose a lot of the adventure when you lose the adversity encountered on the road and what you did to overcome that adversity. A perfect example is we shot up to Nova Scotia and parked this thing and then rode around, beautiful riding in Nova Scotia. And then we moved up further north, closer to Newfoundland, and got a campsite there. And we met with Jerry and his wife. They had ridden to the same place that we were. We had traveled in the truck, pulling this with the bike in it. They had ridden the whole way. And we met them, had dinner. They had all kinds of adventures to tell about the trip up. And you know, we just drove up. You know, so you lose a lot of the adventure. And that's a definite con. It's you know, there's just no replacing all the thousands of different things that can happen on a road trip.
Yeah.
That make it, you know, sort of a more full-featured experience.
I can see that, but imagine this: you were stranded across the border in Mexico a year ago, and could you imagine that situation? And you only had a motorcycle.
Oh no. Yeah.
So
yeah. So yeah, there's pros and cons, and it, you know, it's obviously not for everybody. It wasn't for us until a couple of years ago.
yeah, and you know, you say it's not for everybody, and we keep talking about how big it is, and just like a motorcycle, you know, you and I both know people that you know, motorcycles aren't for everybody, and I know certain people that if I found out they had a motorcycle, I would be worried for them. I also know people that if I found out they were pulling a rig this big, you know, around on the highway, I would avoid the highway, you know, because, you know, it's not for everybody. Pulling something like this can be dangerous. It can be problematic for a lot of people. You know, it's not for everyone to pull something like this around the country.
Yeah, and Mary doesn't want to drive this. She's not pulled it. She could if she needed to, but she just wouldn't be comfortable. It doesn't bother me at all. I'm comfortable doing it, and I do it safely. So yeah, it's it has revolutionized. We're able to cut out all the boring riding. We're able to get to the good riding faster. We're able to get there less expensively. And most important is that with the little time that we have left, we're able to enjoy it, you know, to the fullest. And we have lots of memories of riding the long straight interstate, riding in the sunset, you know, chasing the sun, all that. And so now it's time for us to concentrate on riding where we want to ride.
Understood. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to let's show them around the toy hauler.
Okay. Dwayne, welcome to our home on wheels. Come on in. So this is where our living area back here, but this is also where the Softail or trike go. You can see it's a rubberized floor with tie downs, and this table can go away. The chairs fold up and go up here, and then we can have the bike or trike sitting right here. And it doesn't come, you know, you can, even with the trike in here, you can still have this cutting board here. And this is a storage shelf that we can load. We do load all the way up to the roof and put stuff up there. And then when we need something off the shelf, we can just lower it down. It comes all the way down to here. Get whatever we need off and then get it up out of the way. So while we're traveling, when we're not parked and at a place where we're going to ride, you know, most of this space is taken up by the motorcycle or the trike. That still leaves Mary's kitchen area, microwave, stove, oven, sink, lots of cupboard space, storage in the cupboards and above it, And then behind you over here, we have a freezer, refrigerator, more storage, more storage. This is sort of where we charge all of our devices right here. And this is where I keep the GoPro and drone and everything in there. And trash can, just like in a regular house. We have a heater. This is the intake for the heater, and there's ducts all throughout for heating. This is the air conditioner, the intake for the air conditioner, and then there's ducts for the air conditioner all throughout. So when the trike is in here, our space is confined to about right here forward. When the motorcycle's in here, it's just right along here, and we have plenty of space on either side to go back and store stuff, or even set up a chair and sit down. So we have some good workable space here, even with the trike or motorcycle in it. Importantly, we have a completely unimpaired kitchen area. Again, just a little bit more storage right in this area, right here. And we also use this area for keys and charging devices and such. And then in here, we have the bathroom, which has both heating, air conditioning ducts, toilet, shower, sink, medicine cabinet, lots of cabinets over there for towels and storing all of our stuff, and very comfortable. And then in here we have our bedroom. It's a full queen size bed. Below the bed is storage, so we can store a lot of stuff down there: motorcycle helmets, boots, warm weather gear, cold weather gear. We have all of our shelves up here, and then each one on each side there's a hanging closet, and each side has a little nightstand, USB ports all around, and then again air conditioning, heating in here. And then if you look over here, we have a TV where we can watch YouTube, Amazon, or hook up the computer to it and do computer work using the TV screen. It also has a whatever those fancy new antennas are, which we don't use. We don't watch TV that has advertisements. Hate advertisements. And this door closes right here. Close off the bedroom from the rest of the trailer if you want to. So that's the inside. And you take a look at this right here. This is a thermostat, just like in a house, where you can set it on heat or cold and set the temperature where you want. This is just the gauge center for light controls and fresh water. Of course, it has a hot water heater. And yeah, it's a home on wheels, and it's very comfortable. Outside, let me show you a few things. So if it's raining or the sun's really shining and you want to get into the shade, you can put the awning out. There are also electrical outlets on the outside, so a lot of times we'll have the awning out, have our chairs out, and then put a fan out here and have a fan blowing on us if we want. And a lot of people put TVs out here. There's a cable hookup. This is storage, a storage compartment that can be accessed from either side of the trailer. And it didn't come with this, but we put in a tray so that it's easy access to get everything in here. So we load everything up in here, open this up, pull it out, get whatever we need, slide it back in. What this thing does is it allows us to travel where we want to go, have the food we want, be in our own bed, and save just a huge amount of time on road trips, be much more comfortable. And of course, during the whole coronavirus thing, people either weren't able to stay in motels or they were a little bit leery staying in motels. This is our own home. We're social distancing when we're in it. So having a toy hauler is not for everybody. It wouldn't even been for us, 15, 20 years ago. But right now, it's perfect for us. You guys, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. It's free and it helps us out a lot. Share this video with your friends. You never know who might be interested in traveling this way. We appreciate you watching. You all ride safe out there.